Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me this morning for our session on grants for small businesses. My name is Kristy. I'm a presenter and an advisor for Business Station as part of the Commonwealth Government's Digital Solutions Program. So thanks for joining for this session. What we're going to go through today is we're going to first talk a lot about grant writing and how you can achieve success in the grant space. And then towards the end, we'll touch on where you can find specific grants and some more generic grants that are available regularly. So we'll sort of go through that in the second part of the session. Now, for me, I have my own small business. I have personally applied for and successfully received more than, I would say, 10 to 15 grants for my own and for other businesses. And they've really varied, anything from, your quick cash grabs like COVID funding and that kind of thing, and, recovery grant type funding, right through to extensive major project funding. So hopefully I can be of assistance and pass on some of that knowledge and experience with you today. Just keep in mind, if you've got any questions at any time, if you can use the chat functionality, I've got my eye on that. So I will answer any questions as we go. I will also then stay on towards the end to answer questions if you want to save them till then, but by all means, please stop me as we go. So before we sort of start to get into it, we'll just sort of touch on what grants and other support is generic and sort of generically available. Most grants are available from your state government, but there's also grants that are available at a federal level. With government grants, they're generally for specific projects, not general business. You would need a specific plan to be eligible, and not just having, a business idea, so to speak. There are a few grants that are for starting a business, but aside from grants, probably something that I think is more helpful for new businesses or people that are starting out is a lot of the other government assistance that is available. So you've got a range of different things like this webinar that you're joining today. That's part of a Commonwealth Government program, but there's other business advisory services that we offer as part of Digital Solutions Program, but there are many others as well. There's financial and tax advice. Sometimes there's government funded loans and support in the financial side of things. So a lot of that government assistance that takes different forms aside from just money in terms of grants can be a lot more helpful, I think. And sometimes they can even be more important to a new business than winning actual grant money, because they really ensure sustainability and help you achieve your goals along the way. Now, grants are generally for expansion of business, for training, for research and development. There's a range of import and export grants, or commercialising a specific product. And the reason these grants exist are essentially so that small business achieves the government's economic and social policies. And those policies sort of sit around a thriving economy, to reduce unemployment, and unemployment figures and showing that your project can actually boost employment is always going to be highly regarded in a grant application, and also to build stronger communities. That's sort of the three pillars that I think that the grants exist so that small businesses can carry out those functions. And that's what it does. It essentially allows you to carry out the functions that the government needs to make the economy function well. But before you start looking at opportunities, you really need to determine if you are grant ready as yet. Now, grant success is, in my opinion, directly correlated to business success. So you do have to have a strong business plan. You have to have a strong strategy in place to make sure that you can effectively answer the application questions and therefore carry out the project that you're proposing. Now, to answer the questions in a grant application, you would have to have an intimate knowledge of your business plan, and have formed some kind of detailed marketing strategy around it. You will have to know how the strategy is going to be implemented and make sure that you have the resources. Now, that could be financial resources if the grant is matched funding, or if the grant will only cover a portion of the project, or it could be staffing and other resources. You also should have developed a clear understanding and have some proven research on how this will succeed. So prove that there is a market, essentially. The value of a grant is really how it's going to enable your business success. So the true test of your strategy is that it is going to deliver the specific outcome that the funding body is chasing. Now, those outcomes, you'll hear me talk about this quite a bit throughout today, but those outcomes are dictated by the funding body, and there's something that you should pay very specific attention to throughout your grant application in terms of answering questions, your own business outcomes, and they should be directly aligned with the outcome that's dictated by the funder. But before you get started, there's a few things that you need to have. You will normally have to have an ABN. You will need to be operating in the state that is providing the grant funding. Now, you need to be careful here because you may have registered your business or have multiple locations. So, you know, your ABN is registered in another state. However, you do have operations in the particular state that's offering the funding if it's a state-based grant. So that might be something that you need to have a look at there. You would generally have to have any relevant licenses and approvals, or you would have to have clearly defined a pathway on how to achieve those approvals or to obtain the necessary license. And be able to describe that, because no funder is going to want to fund something that can't legally go ahead. You'll have to have defined your target market. And this will be based on a lot of research. It'll be internal research and external research. And it kind of goes back to business planning and your marketing strategy. So you really have to prove that there is demand for this product or service, and define who the market is that is going to be purchasing the product or service or utilizing whatever the service is. If in the case that the grant is matched funding, you would generally have to have proof of that. Sometimes that can be in kind, sometimes it can be based on forecast sales, but a lot of the time you just have to have a bank statement or some kind of proof, or sign a declaration that you have the funds. Now, we've touched on what the funding's for, but grants are essentially used to achieve that government policy and their policy objectives, which really does involve the payment of billions of dollars each year to the non-government sector. So the government is relying on small business to carry out these functions. Now, it can include things like increased social services, expand your business or opportunities for business expansion. Sometimes there's emergency relief, which we've seen a lot with floods, fires, cyclones, and COVID. So keep that in mind, and normally they will be widely publicised. And also the research and innovation space. But depending on where the funding is coming from, these objectives really vary. But in all cases, you'll have to have a realistic project. That project is going to have a strong and dedicated backing, and it has to have a high likelihood of success. So think of it like like you're seeking investors. Just because it's government doesn't mean that they're not going to pay attention to what your specific project is and what the outcomes are going to be. They are going to make sure that they're investing in something that is going to be successful and is worth their while and achieving their objectives. So some key considerations when you're deciding to submit an application. First of all, on the financial side of things, do you have the financial capacity, considering that a lot of grants are matched funding, or the grant may not cover the entire project. So if you've estimated your project is a $500,000 project, then you might only have, you know, $200,000 yourself, and the funding's only for another 100. So you're a little bit short. So you're obviously going to have to really determine that quickly. Determining if you've got the resources to deliver the project. Now that could be staff resources, obviously financial resources we've touched on. Make sure the project's consistent with your overall business strategy. There's no point going off on a tangent on a different project and leaving your business or neglecting your core business and it having a negative impact. So think to yourself, a lot of people tend to get caught up with, oh, there's money available, you know, I want to get access to it, and totally sort of go off the path of their core business. But I would recommend, just for your own sanity and for consistency with your own strategy, make sure that this new project is consistent with your overall business goals. Consider if you've got the time to complete the application in the first instance. So depending on how and when you found out about the grant, you will need to determine whether or not you have the time. And then obviously you have to meet the eligibility requirements. Now, I've had a really good question come through, which is how do you determine if you qualify for a certain grant? And this person said that they don't feel like they fall into any of the categories. It's an interesting one. You really have to have a look at, again, what the funding's for. There'll be some strict eligibility in terms of, you know, you have to be based in a particular state, you have to be a particular business structure. So there'll be some strict eligibility. But if you're finding that your project isn't fitting into, you know, let's say you meet all of the specific eligibility and your project isn't quite matching what the objectives are, then it's just not going to be an opportunity for you. But I would keep looking. Now, depending on, you know, if you're I guess grant aware and you're looking at grants regularly and you're understanding these eligibility, and there's always one thing that's getting you unstuck, like the particular business structure. Perhaps you're a sole trader and you notice that all of these grants are for companies, you know, so you need to change your business structure. So there could be some things that are within your control in terms of, you know, your business, and other things that are outside of your control. And perhaps it's just that your business doesn't fall into or doesn't really meet some of the core government objectives. They are pretty consistently similar in terms of you know, business growth, expansion, employment opportunities, and if it's going to trigger you know, any positive outcome for the economy, the local economy. So keep that in mind. But certainly to the person that's asked this question, if you'd like to sit with someone and have a chat about your project and, you know, see what's happening in the grant space and why perhaps your business isn't meeting the eligibility, I'll tell you at the end of the session the contact details to apply for some one-on-one advisory services as part of this Commonwealth Government project, because we can certainly talk to you about grants as part of that. So with any grant opportunity, you have to weigh up the opportunity with any risks or downside that might be associated with it. Now, in terms of pre-application, let's say you have found a suitable grant, you're looking into it further to decide if you're going to apply. Then there are some more considerations. We've touched on eligibility. Your business has to meet that. Now, that could be as simple as determining what type of organisation the funding body is looking to fund. And at this point, you may need to have a look and see if any changes need to be made to your structure. I would absolutely have a really thorough read of the guidelines. Have a look at the process, the requirements, and all of the application forms. I tend to have a look at them all, read them start to finish, because something might jump out. You know, you don't want to get well into a particular application, having invested significant time to it, to realise that there's one part that you just can't answer, so you're not actually ready to apply for that grant. So have a read through of everything start to finish. Also download all supporting information. Now, this will be things like terms and conditions. There'll be frequently asked questions. There'll be application tips. Once you've downloaded it, obviously, you know, save it somewhere, have a thorough read of it all. Again, read it start to finish and make sure that you've got a really good understanding of what you're up for. Have a look at the objectives of the funding body and determine what they're looking to achieve, and match your project to it. Can your project satisfy those objectives? Now, if this is the point that you're getting stuck at, in terms of you meet all of the eligibility, but you just aren't satisfying the objectives of the funding body, you've got two options there. You can not apply for the grant because you're not suitable to it, or you can have a look at adapting your project to suit it. So it may or may not be viable for you, or it might not be a suitable option to adapt your project, in which case I would keep looking for different grant opportunities. But if there's a trend, like I said, that you notice that you're never fitting into it because you're not meeting core objectives, and like I said, they'll always be around expansion, positive return for the local economy, community focus, and employment focus. So keep that in mind. But once you've had a look at these objectives for a particular grant, if you're in that pre-application stage, keep them handy, because you'll keep referring back to those objectives throughout the application process. Also ask questions or seek clarification from the funding body. There's going to be a period of time that you can go through and ask questions, and I would absolutely make use of this. If you've read everything start to finish, then no doubt you will have had questions pop up along the way, sorry. But keep in mind that they also have things like briefing or information sessions. So you can get more information through those. I find them really helpful because even if, let's say you've read everything start to finish, you don't have any questions yourself, sometimes there's other people in those briefings or info sessions that do ask questions, and they're possibly things you haven't thought of yet. So I would really take on any ability to ask questions, seek information, listen to other people ask questions, because you never know what sort of gold nuggets you might find in that. Those questions then generally are turned into another FAQ document. So always check back. And once you've registered for a particular grant, normally you will get updates and information. I will say also that a lot of this information that we're going through today is quite applicable to tender applications as well. So keep that in mind. Now, in terms of the preparation side of things, you'll have to make sure that you're well and truly prepared just for the application process. There's some things that you have to take into consideration for that. First of all, time, and this has come up a couple of times already, but time is a major factor. Just the application process alone takes time, so don't expect to do it last minute. The more grant aware you are, and the more that you're seeking grant opportunities, the earlier you kind of find out about grants. So let's say every week you go onto the grant finder tool, which I'll give you the URL for. You might find a new opportunity, and then you've got from the start of that period when it's released right through until when it closes, rather than just stumbling across it last minute and then being in a rush to get it done. In terms of the actual application process, I would treat it as a project and have that team approach. Don't just, keep it all internal. Have a chat to someone else within your business about it, even if it's friends or a friend or family, or an advisor, but have a brainstorm and get input from other people, because the questions will be written. If you haven't attended a briefing session, or if there isn't a briefing session, it will only be your own interpretation as to how to answer that question. So if you can sort of bounce ideas off someone else and have a chat to someone else about how best to answer a particular question, then I think that can be really helpful. You don't want to interpret it the wrong way, and then base your entire grant application on that interpretation when it's not quite right, or someone has a differing point of view. If you do have other people in your organisation that have to provide you specific information, identify them. Who does what is a really good idea. And like I said, treat it as a project so that you're giving people specific deadlines, giving yourself specific deadlines. So anyone that's involved in the process should have, a list of what they need to do and when they need to do it by. Now, there'll be people that need to do, the marketing plan or the strategy development side of things. Sometimes you need to do document design and present it nicely. Other times it's just a fill-in format online. So determine that, because you might need to get someone to do document design for you. If you've got various people answering various components of your grant, you might need somebody to collate all of those answers. So let's say there's a marketing question and there's an operational question, there's a finance question. So you're getting different people to answer those. One thing you don't want to do is submit it with just their answers without having edited it, because I think a grant application, like a tender application or an award submission or anything like that, it has to tell a story from start to finish. You'll have a real person assessing that. It has to flow smoothly. It has to really fill all gaps and answer all questions that they might have, so that they can determine if you're eligible or suitable for the particular grant. Keep in mind as well, you might need things from a bookkeeper or an accountant. Things as simple as an ASIC, form, an ASIC document with your business, registered business details on it, or you might need profit and loss statements, balance sheets, or even, your last year's financials. There can be some pretty extensive information financially that they need, and even just some basic stuff. So make sure that you've told those people well in advance what you need from them as well, because you don't want to get caught out last minute. Now, that sort of leads into the info gathering. This is really a key part of the process. There's going to be those documents that you'll need to get, and they could take a little bit of time. So you have to request them from an accountant or some other third party, or they need to, you know, if it's in the case of your business financials, perhaps they need to finish your last year's business financials. So some of this isn't work that you'll need to do, and it's not specifically hard work for you, but you don't want to be caught out at the last minute trying to push someone else to get you a document that you could have told them about, you know, weeks or months earlier. So gather those internal and external inputs really early in the process, and then collate all that information that you require. Now, it could include things like your corporate details, your ASIC and business name registration certificates, which I touched on. It could be things like insurance certificates of currency. Sometimes they'll ask for referees or written testimonials, so you might need that. There could be brochures and marketing literature that's needed. Sometimes you'll even need ISO certification. So perhaps you need to actually get that certification. So you've got all the credentials to get it, but you haven't gone through that process. So that could be something that takes time as well. There could be also be other policies and procedures or work instructions that you need to develop. There will also be licenses and permits, as I mentioned, so you might have to do some research around that. Sometimes they'll need CVs of key personnel. So do keep that in mind. If you're a small business owner and have been for a long time, you may not even have a CV. So this could be something that you need to develop. But again, that's something that's going to demonstrate how well you can actually carry out the objectives of the funding body. You'll need a description of your business, a business plan or a project plan, or a strategic marketing plan that's specific to the project. So that will be something that you have to develop. You'll have to have a budget. We'll talk a little bit more about the project budget, but you'll have to have a good plan on how that funding is going to be used. We will expand on that because there's a few key things with that. But also keep in mind, right from the outset, you're going to have a good defined project. So you're going to have a written description of that, and that should include the aims and objectives that you're aiming to achieve, but they should link back to the grant objectives. So it has to align with the funding body's objectives and what they actually want, but it also has to align with the budget. So your budget items have to be part of the description. So you don't want to, have a description, but then have these, extra sort of budget items that can't, an assessor can't really link in well. So do keep that in mind as well. Now, when it comes to budgeting, you have to be really careful, because if you're successful with a grant application, you're going to have to spend the funds exactly as you've outlined in the budget. So you'll need to complete a really accurate outline of your program or project costs and make sure they're eligible, each individual cost, under the grant you're applying for. But then for you as a business, you would also need to make sure that you keep a good note of any project costs that you aren't eligible for funding for. So let's say you've developed a project, there's 20 different line items or expenses that are eligible for funding, but there's another 10 that aren't. You still have to cover the 10 that aren't, and that money is going to have to come out of your own pocket. If it's match funding, then that's okay. It could be captured under that, but just keep that in mind and make sure that somewhere, it won't be in the application process, but somewhere in your own internal documents, you are actually factoring in the overall project cost, if that makes sense. Now, you're going to have to understand the funding body's requirements before you prepare this budget or, the program, or even, you're going to have to research the budget section. Also check the format that the funding body will want that particular budget in. Some funders will allow you to use your own budget template. Others will provide you an Excel document that you'll have to input information to. And that kind of incorporates their own budget lines, but other times it's a fill-in format online. So I'd be really keeping this budget in an Excel document, for example, and then transferring that data, that information over to the online portal once it's final and it all makes sense. But determine what sort of expenses are eligible. Make sure that you work with others to determine costs as well. So you're going to create the budget, but you're going to have to work with perhaps your team members but also suppliers and whoever's going to be carrying out the various aspects of your project. Figure out their anticipated needs, what costs might be associated with that. One thing that I think you have to be really careful with here is that you might be applying for grant funding in, let's say, October, but the funding body isn't going to announce who has been successful till December, and you can't start your project till the 1st of January, for example. So if you're getting a quote from a supplier now, you have to make sure that that price is going to be held, or it's going to still be relevant come 1st of January or whatever date it is that your project actually starts. So I'd be really open with suppliers here. I would talk to them about what you're doing, explain to them that you're applying for funding, explain to them when the project will start, and see if they can write it into their quote that the price isn't held for 30 days or whatever it is that's sort of typical, but perhaps they can guarantee that price until at the point that you're actually advised that you can start the project. So that's really important. Now, to improve your chances of getting your grant across the line, make sure that your grant budget is consistent with the objectives again. So link your description with the budget, with the funder's objectives. I would just do that by checking that anything in your project description that may have a cost attached to it is reflected in the budget that you've prepared. So some things that you should consider are any direct costs for grants. So personnel, staff costs, it could be travel, it could be purchase of equipment perhaps. There may be supplies, and you will generally have to break down any supplies into categories as well. You also might want to consider including in-kind contributions, which are volunteers basically, or anything that you've traded for goods and services, and then indirect costs for grants. So that could be overheads and lease costs and that kind of thing. So do keep all of that in mind and just check against the eligibility as you're going. Now, if you're providing a high quality budget with your grant application, it will very much increase your likelihood of getting approved. So that's a really key thing. As an assessor, yes, they're reading the description, but they're going to look at the budget and go, okay, is this value for money? What is it specifically that we're funding? It also, a good budget makes it a lot easier to actually run your program or your project, because you're going to know exactly how much you can spend and on what. Don't forget, at the end of your project, when the project's completed, you're going to have to prepare a grant report to the funding body and report back on what you spent. You'll have to show evidence of invoices and receipts and that kind of thing, and really justify each line item. So having that good budget that you're working from really helps in that sense as well. Also keep in mind that writing a budget for a grant is not the same as an organisational budget. So this is just specific to the project. Okay, so do keep that in mind. Now, there's a couple of budget do's and don'ts. First of all, don't request, or do not request more than the maximum amount available, because it might immediately make your application ineligible, but it also indicates to the panel that you haven't read the guidelines very well, so you might lose a little bit of credibility there. Don't expect a grant to pay for your entire project. A lot of contributions will need to come, or a lot of the time, I should say, contributions will need to come from other sources, and that's kind of generally expected. Sometimes it can be in-kind support or contributions from your organisation. Sometimes it can be generated income by way of sales or fees, or it can even be other grant funding or sponsorships and donations sometimes. But I have come across a couple of grants that you just need to have the cash, essentially. So they don't want to rely on the what ifs of other grant funding or sponsorships and that sort of thing. Do definitely read all the explanatory notes, as I've highlighted. Now, in terms of the overall explanatory notes, that's one thing, but there will be budgetary related explanatory notes as well. Those notes are intended to guide you to actually complete the budget section. They also do provide some examples of the type of income and expenditure items that will have to be included. So I find those kind of notes and info really helpful as well. But it's a good idea to do a draft budget before you transfer it into the actual application form. As I said, always keep that by way of your own personal Excel document. And then you can sort of play with the figures in that document. And then when you're ready and you've got it 100% ready to go, you can transfer the total amounts into the online portal or into their budget, whatever's easiest. Do not include GST in your budget figures. Normally a grant will highlight that anyway, so that's pretty straightforward. Do certainly estimate the in-kind support. So these are non-cash items donated to your project. You'll only be able to provide estimates of their value, but it is really important because it shows the real cost of your project. Sometimes you can get a lot of things in kind, but make sure that you account for them if you're allowed to in the budget. Certainly do contact the funding body if you've got any questions or if you need any guidance in completing your budget. They'll be really helpful. Even if there's an item that you're not 100% sure of, don't leave it in there thinking, oh, I hope I get that through. Contact them. But this is why it's really good to do your budget, do your project description, get your application ready well in advance, because you'll still be within that time frame that you can ask questions. The other recommendation that I have is to do the expenses section of your budget first. So be realistic about what you ask for there. Don't underestimate the time and the cost of the project. So almost do a wish list sort of budget first. But also be careful not to inflate the costs of your project, because there is an assessment committee or a panel that are looking at your budget, and they will look very carefully at value for money. So do keep that in mind as well. They are looking out for overinflated items in that sense. But absolutely make sure you look at the personnel time involved as well. Get suppliers, costs, and verify their availability at the time that you can actually start the project as well. Make sure if there's any travel, accommodation, living expenses that you've accounted for that. Look at cost of materials, equipment hire, that kind of thing. So do all of the expenses first, then look at the income. So with the income section, you're going to look at how much you can apply for this particular grant. You will look at if there's any in-kind support you can source, whether there's any cash donations or sponsorship opportunities, any earned income that you can use, but keep in mind you can't always use that. And then look at what your organisation can afford to contribute to the project. There could also be confirmed or unconfirmed income from other grants. But again, the budget notes will tell you whether or not you can use that in your budget. But once you've done the expenses and the income, your budget should balance. The income should equal the expenditure. And if you've completed your budget and it balances, well done, you're on to the next step, but that's really important. So any item on your budget should also be linked back to the description of your project and the objectives of the grant. I know I've said that a million times, but it's so important that it flows through. And I find when you're completing a grant application, you can kind of get off track a little bit and start, go off on a bit of a tangent in terms of the project, get a bit carried away, but always link back to those objectives. I would also recommend when you're doing a budget, do the maximum budget first, like that wish list, and then work backwards from there based on the level of funding and cut out items you don't need. But keep in mind, if there's things that you do need for your project, you can't just eliminate them for the purpose of getting the grant. Factor them in another document, in another budget that you might have, because they will be, expenses that are specifically related to the project that you'll need to incur at some stage. Okay, so when it comes to writing your responses, I would certainly write in accordance with the application guidelines. So answer the specific questions, thoroughly read those questions so that you truly understand them first, and seek someone else's point of view by way of interpretation if you're not sure. You'll have to provide clear and detailed descriptions of how the proposal or how the project's going to be implemented. You'll generally have to have a description of your organisation. Now, within that, you're going to establish credibility and your qualifications for funding. So keep that in mind. If your business has been operating a long period of time, talk about achievements and that kind of thing. With the project, you'll obviously, and the project description, you're going to clearly define the aims and objectives. Use the same wording as the funding body. If they've talked about community development, then you're going to really answer that with, a description on community development, or, increase in employment. Don't just assume that they will know that this project is going to generate employment. Really spell it out if that's their objectives. And outline how those objectives are going to be achieved. But you're also going to have to outline how you're going to measure that as well. So it's not just going to be this sort of broad, yep, it's going to all be fine. You're going to have to talk about how that's going to be measured. I would also link those proposed outcomes or the projected deliverables to always look at benefit to the community or the target group that the funding body has specified, and the amount of funding. So outline those long-term benefits to your business, but also the community, and demonstrate how it's going to benefit that target group, and that will be outlined in the objectives. Right, factually, the information that you submit has to be accurate. It may be audited, be bold, be positive, but don't be too exaggerated, particularly in your claims and the outcomes. Don't be too exaggerated there. Provide evidence in wherever you can to support the application. Now, that could be by way of research. There could be a number of bits of evidence that you can use there, but the more evidence you provide, the more the assessment panel is going to know that you've done your due diligence and you've really investigated and you've got proof that this is going to work. So it is like essentially a business plan, but in a shortened version, because sometimes you really don't have many words, characters, in these online portals or pages where you can get this project idea across the line. Repeat that link to the funder's objectives throughout each section of your grant application as well. Now, another tip that I've got when it comes to writing your grants or applying for grants is to check websites and annual reports for any information that you can on past recipients of the particular grant, particularly if it is a grant that has rolled on, it has different rounds, and it's sort of an annual grant. That will give you a feel for what's likely to be funded or what's been funded in the past. So do keep that in mind as well. In terms of your writing style, you need to set out your document structure in the same logical sequence, using the same headings in the case that it's a document that you develop yourself. Keep in mind, most grants and applications are going online now, so that you don't have to prepare a PDF document and upload it. You're just filling in particular sections in an online portal. However, in the case that you are developing your own document and submitting it as a PDF, keep those headings consistent so that when the assessor is assessing, they're going, that's the question, that's clearly their answer. Don't make them do the work or work hard to just find what your answer is. Obviously, be succinct in your answer, use simple and concise language. Don't waffle, don't repeat too much, but there are times where you need to repeat key messages, particularly if they're linked to objectives. But you will be doing so in answering the specific question. So what you've said in question 1, for example, you might repeat the information in question 2 and 3, but you're not just going to copy and paste the one sentence or paragraph that is repeating that info in that sense. So adapt it to what you're answering. Keep in mind, someone has to read this submission, this grant application, and many other applications. So you want yours to flow, like I said, from start to finish. You want it to build and be a bit of a story that at the end they go, absolutely, the government does want to put their money towards this. Normally you'll need a bit of a title for your project. As creative as you can be, the better. Creative, interesting, but obviously keep it short. You might, in some cases, need an executive summary within your document, but otherwise just focus on that title and really sell it just in a title. Think of it as a really key headline. That repetition is fine. I've touched on that, using persuasive techniques and reinforcing the message. So that's absolutely no problem at all, as long as you're doing it in the right way. and keep it professional. Professional layout, professional fonts, professional wording. So keep that in mind. Don't use vague or speculative or emotive words, things like I believe, I hope. You know, you really want to be more quantifiable than that, and more professional, I would say. Okay, some do's and don'ts for your application. Do absolutely tailor your application for a specific grant. You might be assessing grants regularly and having a look at, you know, you've got a project idea, you're just waiting for the right funding to come along. You might be applying for different funding, but each funding body will have, or each particular grant application will have a different criteria that you're going to have to meet. And it's designed for a specific purpose. So your application needs to be specific to that. Do answer all questions. Make sure that, you know, every question has been answered in its fullest as well. You do need to be succinct, but be thorough as well. If you're unable to answer a particular question on a grant application, then normally that means that you're not quite ready. So rather than guessing or leaving it blank, I would make sure that you get informed, adapt your project, do what you need to do to be able to answer that particular section. I would also say to have a grant strategy, because that really will help you in the long run. It helps to know what grants you're eligible for ahead of time, because it means that you'll be applying early and, you know, getting ready early. And you can map out an application timeline, I should say, and systematically sort of address each grant. But it might also mean that you need to do some work now to be able to apply for a grant later, or adapt your project and work on it until it becomes available. As I've mentioned, consider specific projects instead of the business as a whole. Keep in mind that grants are awarded for specific business activities like product development, import and export agreements, recruiting, training staff. You know, there could be particular projects. So you can't just be for general business. So really focus and hone in on what it is that you're applying for. You're not likely to get funding just purely because you're a startup, unless it's meeting some other criteria. Don't apply for grants that you're unlikely to get. A proper grant application takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I wouldn't waste it applying for grants if you know that you're really not doing a good job of it, you're too rushed, or you're not quite meeting all of the criteria just yet, or satisfying those project objectives. Don't assume that a good startup is a good idea, or assume anything really. Grants and government business assistance are awarded for the fulfillment of those specific requirements that vary between grants. But, you know, a lot of people think, I've got this project, it's just a great idea, someone's going to want to fund it. But even though it could be a great business idea, a good project, don't assume that that funding's going to work unless you're satisfying those project objectives. Also, don't not follow up. There's a lot of grants available. It is possible that you'll be applying for many of them. And I would absolutely think about the long term and follow up on the grants, even if you're unsuccessful. Normally, the grant administrator will have will provide you some feedback. Otherwise, you can ask them information, or you can ask them to book in a time for feedback, and ask them what you've, you know, what areas you can improve on, or how you might have better addressed certain eligibilities. So keep that in mind. Also, just a side note, you can use a professional grant writer's service to improve your chances of getting a grant, or perhaps to even help you save time if you've got, you know, multiple grants that you're applying for. But certainly do your homework in terms of who you're selecting. Make sure you understand their experience, you understand their fees, and their fee is worth it for you. Also, I would ask their success rate before you sign off on them. Don't be afraid to shop around and look for a grant writer that is specific to your industry and that particular grant. So keep that in mind. But the other thing to keep in mind is you can certainly do it yourself. Even if you do employ a grant writer, you're going to have to spend a lot of time giving them information. So be really careful with that. Don't think that if you've employed a grant writer, that's the grant writer, sorry, that's the end of it and they'll just do everything. They're going to have to understand your business in depth. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time working with them to give them that information. They're just going to pull it all together and write the application. So do keep that in mind as well. Now, some top tips before we move on to what grants are available. Now, grant writing isn't easy, especially when you've got a large application process and there's a lot of supporting documentation and evidence that you've got to supply. There could also be, a lot of funding opportunities, so it could be a regular thing. But keep in mind, the more you do it, the easier it will be. But certainly make the document easily understood by an assessor. Make it as easy as possible for the assessor and as engaging as possible. When you're writing grants, put yourself in the shoes of a grant reviewer. They will have to assess many applications. So if you've got a nice, clear application that sets the scene for a case, that is really satisfying those objectives, you've got enthusiasm within it, your driving points home, you're not waffling too much, then it's going to be a lot easily assessed. But also keep in mind that these people that are assessing your grant, particularly if it's a federal grant, they may not know your region, they may not know your industry. So there are some things that you're going to have to spell out. Don't assume that they understand, your business, where you're located and who you are. Certainly answer all questions in full, revise it a lot. Your goal is to develop a clear and concise application. So I would get someone else's eyes on it when you get close to the end. You don't want to, have errors with spelling or grammar and things not quite making sense just because you've looked at it for too long, and sort of overlook some things. And do submit it ahead of time. Obviously, there'll be guidelines around that, but don't leave it to the last minute. There could be some unexpected errors, particularly with uploading documents and that kind of thing, and stress can really play havoc on you. And you don't want to miss out on something or overlook something because you were rushing to make a deadline. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at just some specific grants and where you can find more information. Now, keep in mind, grants are mostly match funding. They're mostly available at a state or a federal government level. There are hundreds of different grant opportunities. So we're obviously, and sorry, I should say that these grant opportunities cover a range of different industries, businesses, and scenarios. So I'm just going to go through some of the grants that we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months. Some of them are likely to pop back up again. Others are specific to particular times and situations. But I'll show you where you can find grants that could be suitable for your particular business. Now, first of all, obviously, there was a lot around the COVID space, lockdown assistant grants and COVID recovery and that kind of thing. I think we're done with that now. But always, if there's any kind of, event, whether it be a weather event or, any kind of assistance that you can seek out in the case of, a situation that's beyond your control, always look out for it. So the most common that we see are, fire, flood, cyclone, and obviously COVID related stuff. The Export Market Development Grant is a great one. That is 50% of eligible export promotional expenses above about $5,000 are covered, and that can be for new or current exporters. So Export Market Development Grants, they are an Australian government financial assistance program that help a lot of small to medium businesses, but not as many as you would think. So I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity. If you are in the game of export or, wanting to export any products, really consider this can help you sort of get that off the ground or help you each year as you promote your product internationally. Now it's being reorientated from a reimbursement model to a grants application program. So previously you'd have to spend the money and then you'd submit your application later and they'd reimburse you for 50% off of those costs above $5,000. But now you can do that in advance. So if it's something that you're considering, obviously you have to write the business case around it, and the project would be, the export of your products or services. But you can apply for the funding, and then you're only committed to go ahead if you actually receive the funding. So it can help in that sense. So it's a lot more responsive to exporting businesses, and you get that upfront certainty. The small to medium enterprise recovery loan scheme. This one was COVID related, but basically it was a government grant, or a government guarantee on loan. So the loan could be secured or unsecured. It was still done through your bank. Now, as I said, it was COVID related. So for businesses that had suffered because of COVID, The reason I've still got it on the screen is because it could, I mean, you could be looking at things like this popping back up, and it was such a fantastic scheme in terms of it was still business as usual in terms of you're applying for a loan. It just made it a lot easier to get that funding across the line. So always keep an eye out for that. It can really help business growth. The back funding, so you're boosting apprenticeship commencement funding, and wage subsidies are fantastic. Now the back funding just finished 30 June, but again, that's something I would expect to see. Now that was for the employment of new staff that you were putting through training. So the government had a list of, it was 50 pages of different certificates you could put them through. If you were putting your staff members through this training, you would get a wage subsidy or a reimbursement of up to, I think it was $28,000 a year or something like that. So it was fantastic funding. And again, something that not many small businesses made use of, but great for the employer and great for the employee. So keep an eye out for that. I really hope that one does pop back up. Boosting female founders is fantastic. That is for businesses that are predominantly female owned, so 51% or more female owned or founded. And that was for growth in the business, female founded business sense. So that was really good. That one comes in rounds, so that will be back as well. So the last round has closed off earlier this year, but I would look out for that one next year because it will most certainly be back. There's a lot of industry-specific grants as well. So tourism generally has things like regional development, Indigenous tourism, business events. There's small business technology investment. There's the small business training skills boost that's going on at the moment. So with both of those, they're 120% tax deduction for any spend in those areas. So that's fantastic for small businesses. I'd certainly keep that in mind. So that's just a few of the top ones that are sort of have been out and are potentially coming out again in the future. But there are hundreds, as I mentioned. The very best way to determine grants that are suitable for you is to go into, and you can see the link on your screen now, the business.gov.au grants and programs. Now, this is a fantastic portal, and it's basically a grant finder tool. So you can input your information, what industry you're in, what your business structure is, and start inputting data, and it will eliminate grants that you won't be eligible for. And then by the time you get to the end of the tool, you'll have a list of what grants you could be eligible for. I would certainly also subscribe to any newsletters from the government and just keep an eye on what's coming out. So that business.gov.au, ATO has a good newsletter that you can subscribe to, and your industry bodies as well. If you're a member of any industry bodies, generally they'll be promoting grant funding in your particular space. So use that grant finder tool. I think that is absolutely fabulous, and that's my go-to. So that's something that I will look at, every few weeks to every month. I'll see what's changed and what's available. Grant Connect is the next one that you see on the list there. That's a government grant information system, and it's a centralised publication of any forecast or current Australian government grant opportunities. Plus, it will list what grants have been awarded. So if you're applying for a grant and you want to see who's been awarded that funding in the past, this is where you go. So I find that really handy as well. Like I said earlier, it'll give you an idea of what sort of projects have been funded, and maybe help you refine your idea a little bit. Self-Start is a good one to have a look at as well. Now, that's really there to support individuals through the first stages of starting their own business. So it'll help you through the planning, validating your idea, finding some local support as well, right through to perfecting, a sales pitch essentially. So that particular website has information and links to existing resources, and there's something like 11 different topic areas. So it's a fantastic one if you're wanting to do a bit of self-learning, but also to really help you get your business off the ground. And then obviously COVID assistance, I've still got that on there, but I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to take it off because I think this is hopefully on the way out. I think we're done with that. Now, some more info. The Export Market Development Grant I mentioned, that is available through Austrade. That's a really good one. I would certainly have a look at that. And if you are exporting any products or services, certainly jump on that one. Now, that is available, so it's closed at the moment, but it's available at the end of every financial year. So it closed sort of by, I think, mid-August. So you get that 6 weeks after the end of the financial year to apply for the next financial year. So obviously happens every year, so keep an eye on that. Research and development tax incentives are good. Now, they really help you to innovate and grow, and it helps you through offsetting costs of eligible research and development. So that really encourages small businesses to conduct research and development and grow, which obviously benefits the Australian economy. But they can not only help you by way of funding, and there is a lot of financial support in that space, but there is also some research service providers listed on their website, which I think is helpful as well. So if you're looking at conducting any research, I would go through the government recommended service providers. Landing pads is another good one. Now, that is for any small businesses that are market ready and you're ready to sort of scale up, and it basically provides you a hub to work from in some of, some key areas. So there's San Francisco, Tel Aviv, Shanghai, Berlin, and Singapore. And you'll have that operational base, plus at that base you get things like customized support to really expand in that particular area. So have a look at that one. They are accepting future applications in that space. Now, the other things that I would keep an eye on are networking events, any given government networking events that are available that can help you not only to connect you with other small businesses, but will highlight other opportunities. Obviously, there's grants that are available not only at a government, state and federal level, but also there could be, local shires that are putting together community grants and that kind of thing, and other organisations, not-for-profits and whatnot. So keep that in mind. There's also business advisory services, like the program that we're part of, Digital Solutions, is a Commonwealth Government business advisory initiative. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but there's a range of them. Certainly keep an eye on that. Subscribe to those newsletters, as I mentioned, and make the most of any grant opportunities. So stay grant aware. When you do come across a grant, you have to work through that process, essentially process of elimination. Have a look at the eligibility. Is it right for you? Keep going until you find it's maybe something you come across, it means it's not right for you. Otherwise, go right through to apply. Just one thing from a cybersecurity perspective, make sure that you're only accessing government grants through government websites. Be aware of any imitations. So there's a range of sites out there. If you were to Google, Australian government grant, you'd see a lot of non-government sites come up. Any official government websites will have that .gov.au suffix. Don't trust other sites for anything more than information. You will never pay a fee. You will never ever pay a fee for applying for a grant or for grant information. So they are always available to apply for free. If you're paying for access on any level, then you're being scammed. So certainly keep that in mind as well. All right, so that wraps up our session on grants for small business. I will stay on now if you've got any questions, so feel free to ask anything. But also keep in mind, as I mentioned, we are part of a Commonwealth Government funded program called Digital Solutions. So you can get access to 3 hours of one-on-one assistance with an advisor for $44. You can then make up that 7-hour package that you see on the screen by way of additional workshops and webinars, and they're all obviously covered under that price. So if you want to know more about grants and help with funding, or if you want anything help in the digital space, we can assist there. So keep that in mind. There is some eligibility. You have to be, for this particular program through us, you have to be ABN registered in WA, Queensland or NT. You have to be operating for profit and employ fewer than 20 full-time staff. So do keep that in mind. There's a link on your screen if you'd like to register. If you've got any questions now, please pop them through. But otherwise, good luck with any grant applications. So I've got a question. How many hours are allocated only for the grant topic? As part of the Digital Solutions program, you get 3 hours one-on-one with an advisor. So if you wanted to speak about grants for all 3 of those sessions, then you certainly can do so. With regards to the rest of the, making up the 7 hours, you might find that, webinars and workshops you focus on are in different areas. But we've got things like business planning and a range of different things. But otherwise, yes, the 3 hours you can tailor entirely to grant. And there's a couple of advisors that are specialists in that area. Any other questions, please shoot them through. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining today and good luck.